Twilight slowly rose to his feet. Wiping the smile from his face, he fixed his gaze upon Luminous with a cold, emotionless expression. Good grief, you are right. It seems I got a little carried away returning to the living world after so long. I need to hurry up and fulfill my objective so I can welcome back Lord Veldanava. Upon hearing that declaration, Luminous was shaken. Veldanava, you say? If those words were true, the situation would change completely in more ways than one. It meant that simply defeating the world-destroying dragon Ivorge would not be the end of it. A mountain of problems would remain afterward. To begin with, there are many who adore Veldanava. Twilight was one of them, but he wasn't alone. There were many other believers. Naturally, some of them were present here, which meant the current forces were likely to be split in two. Recognizing this as a major problem, it was no wonder Luminous felt a rush of panic. Luminous herself had no sentimental attachment to Veldanava. While she acknowledged him as a great being, she possessed absolutely no desire to pledge loyalty to him or risk her life to protect him. Even when she heard he had been killed by humans of a certain kingdom, she had merely thought, is that so? Even regarding the fact that he had not revived despite being an absolutely immortal true dragon, her understanding went no further than, I suppose things like that happen, too. Guy seemed to consider him a close friend, and Ramrus appeared to owe him a debt of gratitude. Honestly speaking, there was a high possibility that these two would become enemies. He was Millam's father, but it was unclear if she had any sentimental attachment to him. Given her usual carefree nature, it seemed likely she lacked even the affection of a child for a parent. As for Daggeril and his kin, perhaps because they had once fought and been defeated, they seemed to harbor feelings close to subservience. If Veldanava were to revive, they would undoubtedly turn into enemies. However, since they were currently sealed by Valdor's fertile paradox, it was safe to exclude them from the equation for now. Dino was rumored to be a former retainer, but he was already hostile, so that made no difference now. Judging by the behavior of Benimera and the reinforcements, there seemed no need to be wary of them. Then there were Leon and Remure. Leon was a young demon lord, and seemed to have little interest in anything other than matters concerning Chloe. Since Chloe was currently in Luminous's camp, it seemed likely he would remain an ally. As for Remure, he was the most critical factor. The moment Remure turns into an enemy, our defeat would be sealed, but he is the type of person who possesses the resolve to make enemies of humans and demon lords alike, if it is for the sake of obtaining his ideal life. Even if Veldanava attempted to destroy the world, he would surely resist until the very end. That was the conclusion Luminous reached. If Remure was there, they could fight to the end. Victory or defeat was secondary. At the very least, they could leave proof that they had lived. Guy, Ramrus, and Millam. The movements of these three required caution, but that worry could wait. For now, the priority was to steel her resolve and do something about Twilight standing before her. Luminous pondered this deep within her thought acceleration, and made her decision. Luminous regained her composure. Seeing this, Twilight shrugged his shoulders. I honestly intended to add you to our ranks, but it's a shame. Thinking she might obey if he revealed his ultimate piece of information, Twilight had mentioned Veldanava's name. Yet, Luminous's reaction was not favorable. It only served to harden her resolve. At this point, there was no longer any reason to keep her alive. Twilight made that judgment and poured power into the origin blood. Well then, bye-bye. I'll make sure to raise my next daughter to be a more obedient girl. Twilight said this with a smile. In the next instant, he moved with a speed that made his previous movements seem like a lie. The spear pierced through Luminous's chest in a flash, stabbing directly into her heart. Luminous realized then that he had clearly been holding back until now. It was precisely because Twilight had genuinely taken a liking to Luminous that he had tried to recruit her until the very end. However, Luminous had no regrets. Worst case, she had been prepared to accept even death. That said, it was also the truth that she had been hoping for Chloe's help, but with no sign of that happening, Luminous had her heart pierced by the origin blood and collapsed to the ground. In the end, help did not come. It wasn't that she didn't feel sad about it, but Luminous thought, it cannot be helped. Chloe had her hands full being wary of Ivorge. From the perspective of a global crisis, that matter was likely of higher importance. If so, this outcome was also, no, that was wrong. Ah, so that was it. Luminous understood. That was it. I have remembered everything. It wasn't that Chloe couldn't come to save her. There was no need for her to come. If she had seen this outcome, then it was only natural for her to trust in Luminous. After all, yes. Luminous herself was. At the exact moment Luminous was pierced by the Divine Ancestor's blood spear, Origin Blood, Tensura, and her group arrived on the battlefield, accompanied by a multinational coalition. Oh my, things have become quite intense here as well, haven't they? Tensura murmured with a smile. The battle between Millam and Ivorge was taking place inside the Tower of Heaven, so it was not something for others to witness. Even so, their presence could be sensed, so any strong individual could understand that it was a battle of absurd scale. We are going to defend this spot to the death. As soon as Carrion declared this, he threw himself into battle against the cryptids flooding out from the east. Following him were the members of the former Beast King's warrior corps, 100 strong, led by Sophia. From the Flying Beast Knight Order, about 1,000 others, those with relatively light fatigue and high-ranking powerhouses, also joined the fray. The others were focusing on recovery in the former Eurasania, but this deployment was carried out entrusted with the hopes of those comrades. Well then, shall we go on a little sky patrol? Free said, leading only the Sky-Winged group. The Griffins, which were Free's prized assets, were unable to fly due to the effects of being frozen. They weren't incapable of fighting, but Free judged that they would die in vain if things continued as they were. In this final decisive battle, only the elite were needed. Protecting dead weight would only result in a wasteful consumption of precious healing resources. The warriors of Millam's Imperial Guard were also fully motivated, but those lacking the necessary strength stayed behind. In exchange, those present here had fully steeled their resolve. Together with such fierce warriors, Free also took to the skies. So, which direction should we head? Asked Midray. Basically, the warrior priests operated mainly as healers. They were skilled in hand-to-hand combat as well, but as users of precious healing magic, it was more convenient for safety reasons to have them stay in the rear. It was a matter of division of labor being important. They were valued on the battlefield as healers who were also skilled at minimum self-defense. It was Hinata who answered this question. Currently, it seems something strange has happened to Lady Luminous. Neither resurrection nor healing magic can reach her, so it helps that you have joined us. Here in the east, the Crusaders are present, so things are still somewhat manageable. Following Hinata's statement, Benimaru continued. As far as I can grasp, the west is the most dangerous. The north has many with self-regeneration, and the south seems to have healers under Demon Lord Leon's command. If possible, I'd want reserve medical units in all directions, but we can't afford to be picky. First, as an emergency, please handle the west, Hinata concluded. Understood. Then we shall head west, Midray said, leaving those words behind as he immediately began to move. The Kurenai who had remained in the former Eurasania also joined up, along with Gobwa, falling under Benimaru's command. For some reason, Phobio was with them too, but Benimaru decided not to comment on it. While public displays of affection would be a problem, Gobwa and Phobio's compatibility wasn't bad. He judged that letting them stay as a combo would likely improve their combat capabilities. Belt had also arrived, having carefully selected 2,000 of the top members of the Yellow Numbers. To Benimaru, this was incredibly reassuring. Geld, I'm asking the impossible of you, but I'm counting on you until the end. Of course. Now that Lord Remur has returned, there is no anxiety in my heart. Responding to Benimaru, Geld snorted roughly, full of fighting spirit. Even facing the terrifying evil god army, there was no sign of hesitation. Seeing this, Benimaru grinned. Exactly. We can't show an unsightly fight in front of Lord Remur. Then, I am going. Geld walked forward heavily. Not wanting to lose, Benimaru also raised his voice to inspire the warriors. Ignoring Benimaru and the others, the Primordials were holding a meeting. I suppose I shall stay here and support Sir Benimaru, Tensura said, shrewdly securing the place expected to be the most difficult. Understanding this, Carrera tacitly approved. She thought she just needed to finish her share before the final big showdown, and then join up. I'm going to exercise a bit. Being frozen on ice makes my body feel sluggish. Leaving those words behind, Carrera quickly headed north. Ultima was in the south, and Vildora had headed west. Since Tensura was remaining in the east, Carrera likely took care not to overlap on prey. Her decisiveness and ability to take action were truly impressive. Remaining were Misery and Rain. I am worried about Lady Luminous, but I am even more worried about the spell formula left unattended. It can't be helped. I shall act as a temporary stopgap in her stead. Misery instantly grasped the war situation and understood what needed to be done. That was, as she just said herself, to act as Luminous's proxy. Specifically, it meant becoming the vessel for the miracle of God, stretched across the entire battlefield. This was the quintessence of the mystery of faith and grace, a ritual magic that treated the brains of those who believed in the god Luminous as calculation devices. It was an ultimate secret technique that allowed the continuous use of super high difficulty magic by performing calculations with overwhelming performance. The problem was that this formula was specialized for Luminous. If a proxy handled it lightly, the price would be painful. Before that, it should have been impossible to even wield it. However, if it was Misery, the primordial green. Misery has always been good at playing God, haven't you? Playing God, could you perhaps phrase that a bit better? Misery complained with a slightly troubled look, but Rain paid it no mind. Well then, I suppose I shall head to support Lady Luminous, whom I arbitrarily call my soul friend. Leaving that remark, Rain began to move without waiting for a reply. Left alone on the spot, Misery watched Rain leave with concern, wondering, will that girl be alright? Looking at the halted Luminous, Twilight sighed heavily. Ah, man. To think I have to break my greatest masterpiece with my own hands. Twilight murmured this, but then felt a sudden chill and sharpened his gaze. Luminous did not move. However, her body was floating in the air. The divine ancestor's blood spear, origin blood, transformed into rose petals and was sucked into Luminous's chest while glowing faintly. Huh. Why is my spear? Why into Luminous? In front of Twilight, who was astonished by the unexpected situation, Luminous's eyes opened.